Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about the events in Davos regarding Greenland and the rumors that have been doing the rounds about the possible framework. I said in my previous video that I'm going to put up somewhere over here that I believe that Mark Rutte and the EU leaders, prior to going to Davos, had decided that they were going to cave in to Donald Trump's requests regarding Greenland. I also mentioned in that video that the Prime Minister of Denmark, when giving her briefing to the press, looked incredibly demoralized and broken and defeated.
First of all, I would like to express how grateful we are in the Kingdom of Denmark.
She didn't look like a leader that had just exited a meeting feeling really triumphant and excited about the outcome.
For all the support we have received from all over Europe. It has been extremely important in this very difficult situation.
What I did indicate was that, once again, I thought that the EU leaders, along with Mark Rutte, had decided that they were going to cave into Donald Trump's demands regarding Greenland. However, I think, in my personal opinion, that this was done without the Danish Prime Minister's knowledge. I think she was called in, read the Riot Act, told that she needs to get on board, and that is why we saw her in that press briefing looking rather solemn and as if she just got back from a funeral. Now, a lot of this is speculation. It still hasn't been verified. I will try and attach an article from Al Jazeera regarding this, and there are other news outlets that have been putting out messages all through last night after the Davos, after the events at Davos. However, I suspect that there is an element of truth in what has been said, simply because of the analysis that I did in the video that I'm referring to, the video that I did yesterday. I believe that the EU leaders, along with Mark Rutte, threw the Danish Prime Minister under the bus. And one of the reasons I say this is because after the framework had been announced, Donald Trump did mention that if the framework was consummated. So this meant that the discussions were there, they were on the table, an agreement in principle was reached. However, I suspect, once again, that the party concerned, namely the Danish government, were not fully included in this decision making. And that's why he said if the deal was consummated. I know that some will probably say that the Danish Prime Minister, along with her cabinet, were complicit in this deal or in the pre-approval of this deal. However, I'm going to go back to her body language and her choice of words and the way in which she chose to address the press during the conference, and the answers to some of the questions that she made, all mentioned in that video that I did yesterday. Based on all of that, I believe that she looks like she'd been taken by surprise and now been made a deal that she was forced to accept. So once again, these are unconfirmed reports that are circulating. However, if they are indeed true, then let's look at what the framework could entail. Firstly, the Danes would have to continue paying their $700 million stipend to Greenland. Now, what is it for? It's basically to help the Greenlanders maintain a standard of living, and it's based on something called the unity of the realm. Now, the Greenland economy is largely based on fishing, and the revenue that comes in is not sufficient. So this stipend that they receive from the Danes goes to help with education, social care, health care, and it's a yearly stipend that the Danes make to the Greenlanders. This is because in 1953, Greenland became an integral part of Danish territory, so legally and morally the Danes are obliged to make this payment. This now explains why Donald Trump, during his interview with Maria Bartiromo of Fox News after he had delivered his speech, said
Mr. President, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you.
You have talked about this framework. Does this ultimately mean that the U.S. will ultimately acquire Greenland?
Well, I don't know if I can say that, but it could be. I mean, it's possible. Anything's possible. But in the meantime, we're getting everything we wanted: total security, total access to everything, have as many bases, have all the equipment that we want, and we will have everything we want. We're getting everything we want at no cost.
So this is very telling, as it's a brilliant Machiavellian move on Trump's behalf, because the United States will then get what they require from Denmark, but not having to pay anything in return. Now, if you remember, the current treaty doesn't ask the United States to pay any taxes, any levies, any rates of any kind. Now, you imagine if the Danes were unhappy about the $700 million a year stipend that they were paying to the Greenlanders before this framework came into operation. Can you imagine what it would do to their level of anger now? Because the United States, according to this framework, if this framework is correct, then the United States enjoys a lot of supremacy in Greenland, and all of that is going to come at no cost. However, the Danes are still going to have to foot the bill every year to maintain the Greenlanders. If the US had to take over the sovereignty of Greenland, I'm presuming that they would have to then probably take over that $700 million a year stipend that needed to be paid. However, knowing Donald Trump and the shrewd businessman that he is, he would probably have the sovereignty as well as get the Danes to actually contribute that $700 million a year from their side. The second clause in this framework regards the sovereignty, and it's being touted that the United States won't have sovereignty over the entirety of Greenland, but they will have sovereignty over their current military bases and any future military bases. This is really important. This follows a similar framework that the United Kingdom has regarding its bases in Cyprus. This would effectively mean that the current United States bases fall under United States sovereignty and jurisdiction, and if they do expand their military bases, which apparently is going to form part of the framework, then it means they're going to take more territory, they increase their presence. By them increasing their presence, they're going to need more bases. And if by them getting more bases, it means taking up more land, then theoretically that would mean that they have sovereignty over a greater part, all the while not paying any levies, taxes, or anything of the kind. Thirdly, it is rumored that the United States will be putting in an application for the mineral rights in Greenland and that it will be accepted. Now, you know that if that mining does go ahead at some point in the future, you know where that money is going to go to. And lastly, China and Russia will be banned from entering Greenland. If this framework is indeed approved, then Donald Trump has really nailed a major coup in Greenland, because he's gone and got everything he wanted, and it's probably even an even better deal than him having had total sovereignty over the entire island. That is why I said in my last video that I believe he sat down with Mark Rutte. He said to Rutte, this is the framework, get it done, get it approved, and then come back to me. Otherwise, I will escalate. Trump seems to be drawing inspiration from Vito Corleone or Tony Soprano, but in this case, perhaps maybe even Toto Rina. I honestly feel sorry for the Danes and the Greenlanders for the manner in which this debacle has been handled. I also still stand by the fact that I don't believe that the Prime Minister of Denmark was included in the pre-negotiation talks. I think her arm was twisted. She's been made a deal and an offer that she can't refuse. And while she may protest and have her 2 minutes of being upset, she has to go ahead with it. I just feel sorry that the people of Denmark and Greenland have been shafted in this way. If indeed this framework is approved and these reports are actually confirmed. It now makes sense why Gavin Newsom said in his interview he should have brought cushions for the EU leaders to rest their knees on. Because while we know he certainly was referring to the text messages from Mark Rutte and Emmanuel Macron to Donald Trump that were leaked prior to Trump arriving in Davos, I also suspect that because this deal may have been solidified before everyone arrived at Davos, I think it may have been doing the rounds in Washington, and various members of Congress and both parties were aware of this, and that's why I think I feel very strongly that he was also referring to this in a very cryptic manner. So once again, lots coming out of Davos, and I think really tumultuous times ahead for the Arctic region and for the Danes and the Greenlanders in particular. Thank you for spending time with us on this episode. And please remember to like, share and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and with growing our channel.